Modern Spain, the 19th century. The Modern Age. The French Revolution marked the beginning of the Modern Age. The revolution began in 1789 when the French people rebelled against their king Louis XVI. In the late 18th century, much of Europe was in crisis. The French king Louis ruled as an absolute monarch. On the 14th of July, 1789, the people attacked the Bastille, a symbol of the French king's power. The monarchy was abolished and France became a republic. The Republic of France consisted of separation of powers into legislative, executive, and judicial branches. The law recognized all citizens as equal and the nobility lost their special privileges. Ordinary people could vote in elections, but only men, not women. The central ideas of the French Revolution were liberty, equality, and fraternity. Napoleon Bonaparte was a military commander during the French Revolution. He became Emperor of France in 1804. He wanted to establish a big empire that included other European countries. Spain was ruled by Carlos, but his prime minister Manuel de Godoy was really in control. In 1807, Napoleon signed the Treaty of Fontainebleau with Godoy. This allowed the French army to cross Spain to conquer Portugal. The Spanish War of Independence and the Carlist Wars. The French army occupied Spain after Napoleon decided to conquer the country. On May 2nd, 1808, there was a revolt in Madrid against the French. This was the beginning of the Spanish War of Independence, which ended in 1814. The Spanish people fought a guerrilla war against the French army. The French soon controlled most of Spain, and it had two governments. One was controlled by Napoleon's brother, Joseph, and the other was in Cadiz, ruled by Fernando, Carlos's son. The Carlist Wars were a series of conflicts during the 19th century about who should occupy the Spanish throne. At this time, only males could inherit the throne. Fernando only had a daughter, so it meant that his brother Carlos would be the next king. Fernando changed the law so that Isabel could be queen, but there were two groups, liberals and Carlists. The liberals supported Maria Cristina and Isabel, and the Carlists supported Carlos. The First Carlist War began in 1833 and ended with a liberal victory in 1839. There were two other Carlist wars later on. The Spanish Empire. At the start of the 19th century, Spain controlled most of the Central and South America, as well as the Philippines and Asia. But by the end of the century, Spain had lost its last colonies. The colonists were influenced by the French Revolution. They wanted more rights and freedom. During the War of Independence, Spain was fighting against France, so its control over the colonies was weaker than before. In 1898, Spain fought a war against the United States over its remaining colonies, Cuba and Puerto Rico in America, and the Philippines in Asia. During the 1890s, there were revolts in Cuba against Spanish rule. Cuba was very rich in natural resources, so Spain didn't want to lose control. However, the United States supported the Cuban independence movement against Spain. On 15th of February, 1898, the U.S. declared war on Spain. Spain was defeated, and it lost control of the colonies. This event is known as the Disaster of '98. Economic and social change. The Industrial Revolution was a series of economic and technological changes that began in Great Britain in the 18th century. Inventions such as the steam engine meant that products could be made in factories instead of by hand. Industry expanded and became more important than agriculture. Industrial development was limited to some parts of Spain. Transport was also transformed by the invention of the steam engine. Trains powered by coal were developed in the early 19th century. In the second half of the 19th century, the Spanish railway network expanded rapidly. The Industrial Revolution also changed how society was organized. A class-based society developed. There were still big differences between the rich and the poor, but no one was given special privileges officially. Before the Industrial Revolution, society was divided into three estates: the clergy, nobility, and ordinary people. The ordinary people paid taxes. After the Industrial Revolution, there were three classes: the upper class, the middle class, or bourgeoisie, and the working class, or proletariat. Late 19th century Spain. The final years of the reign of Isabel were a period of instability in Spain. There were frequent changes of government and military coups. Isabel was forced to leave Spain in 1868 and abdicated. The monarchy was restored in 1874, so the following period is known as the Restoration. In 1871, Amadeo of Savoy, an Italian prince, became the king of Spain. He was chosen by the Cortes, but he faced a lot of opposition and he abdicated in 1873. In 1873, the First Republic was proclaimed. However, there was a military coup led by General Martinez Campos. This was the end of the Republic. The Restoration coincided with a period of stability which lasted into the early 20th century. However, democracy was quite limited. During this period in Spain, there were elections, but only some men could vote. Elections were also unfair. The conservatives and the liberals both manipulated election results and took turns in government. This system was known as the Turno Pacifico. Opposition to the government and the monarchy began to emerge. Trade unions such as UGT and CNT were created to defend workers' rights and interests. Alternative political parties were also formed, such as the PSOE, ruled by Pablo Iglesias. Artistic movements in the 19th century. Romanticism. It emerged in the late 18th century. Romantic art gave priority to feelings, nature, religion, emotions, revolution, and beauty. Realism. It emerged in the mid-19th century. Realistic art explored the reality of everyday life and the working class. Modernism. It emerged in the late 19th century. Modernism was inspired by nature and religion. In Spain, it is most associated with Antonio Gaudí.